The people who cry the least aren't the strongest. They're the most disconnected. And if you're someone who cries easily, you've probably been judged for it your entire life. They call you sensitive, weak, too much. And after a while, you start believing it. And that changes everything you've been told about sensitivity, toughness, and what it means to be strong. Because you've been taught your whole life that holding it in is maturity, that the people who stay composed are the ones with control. They're not. But here's what no one ever told you: the intensity you feel, the depth, the reactions you can't control. It's not a flaw, it's a signal. A signal that your brain is processing something most people are too numb to notice. And once you understand what that signal really means, everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as weak. You start seeing what others miss. But there's a cost, because the more you feel, the more you see things most people were never meant to notice. You're in a room full of people. Someone tells a story. Everyone nods politely. But you? Your chest tightens, your eyes sting, and you think, what is wrong with me? Nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. They call you sensitive, weak, too much. But here's what they never told you. The people who cry easily aren't falling apart. They're carrying something the rest of the world was never built to hold. There's a reason you feel things at a depth that seems inconvenient. It's not a flaw in your wiring, it's a feature. But here's what most people miss. The people around you, the ones who pride themselves on staying detached, on being tough, they're not stronger than you. They're numbed. And there's a profound difference between strength and numbness. Let's start with something most people get wrong. Crying isn't emotional failure. It's a signal. It's a nervous system response so sophisticated that most organisms on the planet can't perform it. Humans are one of the only species that cry emotionally. Not from pain, not from threat, from meaning, from beauty, from grief, from the weight of something mattering deeply. Think about the last time a movie made you cry. A character lost someone, a song played, and something inside you broke open. For a person who doesn't even exist. That's not weakness. That's a level of cognitive and emotional integration most people never access. The average person glosses over the surface of experience. You absorb it, all of it. Your nervous system doesn't filter emotional data the way most people's does. It lets everything in. You're not broken. You're porous, in a way the world needs but rarely rewards. And this is where it gets interesting. When you cry, your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain, is communicating with your prefrontal cortex, the seat of meaning-making. This isn't a malfunction, this is integration. Your brain is doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, connecting feeling to understanding. The tear itself is a biochemical messenger. It carries stress hormones your body releases when emotional significance has been registered. In other words, your tears are your nervous system saying, "This matters, pay attention." Now think about the person sitting next to you the last time you cried. They looked uncomfortable. Maybe they said, "Are you okay?" But they felt nothing. They weren't protecting themselves. They were missing the message entirely. Their brain didn't register the significance. Or more accurately, it did. But years of suppression prevented the signal from reaching their consciousness. This isn't an advantage. It's a disconnection. And disconnection, sustained over years, has consequences. Here's where it goes deeper. People who cry easily score significantly higher on something researchers call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and differentiate between specific emotional states with precision. Here's what that looks like. Someone asks how you're feeling. Most people say stressed, or tired, or fine. You feel the difference between loneliness and grief, between frustration and disappointment, between admiration and longing. This isn't a small distinction. Harvard research shows individuals with higher emotional granularity have better mental health outcomes, stronger immune function, more adaptive responses to stress. Your vocabulary for your inner life is more precise, and that precision isn't fragility. It's a form of intelligence most people never develop. And here's what no one tells you about that intelligence. It terrifies people who don't have it. You cry at something. The person next to you feels nothing. There's a dissonance. They don't think, I wonder what I'm missing. They think, what's wrong with you? That reaction isn't about you, it's about them. It's the discomfort of someone encountering a depth they can't access and choosing confusion over curiosity. Pay attention to that pattern. Your emotional granularity also gives you access to information most people can't articulate. When a situation feels wrong, you know exactly what's wrong. When a person is unsafe, you can name what makes them unsafe. This isn't intuition in the mystical sense. It's diagnostics. Your nervous system is processing microdata and converting it into emotional signal. You're running a scan on your environment, constantly. Think about the last time someone asked why you didn't trust a certain person. You paused. You said, I just feel it. And they dismissed you. But you weren't being vague. You were being precise about something they lacked the framework to see. Now here's the part that changes everything. The same neurological system that makes you cry easily makes you extraordinary at reading people. The anterior insular cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, two regions active in highly sensitive people. The same regions responsible for empathy and affective resonance, the ability to feel what someone else feels before they say a word. You've experienced this. You walk into a room, everyone's smiling, but you know, immediately, something is wrong. You sit across from someone laughing, but underneath you feel their sadness. You pick up tension no one has acknowledged. This isn't mystical. Your nervous system is processing emotional data at a speed most people can't match. The clinical literature calls it high affective empathy. You probably call it exhausting, and it is exhausting. You're running more data at higher resolution with fewer filters in every interaction. While others skim the surface, you're reading the subtext, the tone, the micro-expressions, the pauses. You don't get to turn it off. That's the cost. But the cost is attached to something rare. Here's what that rarity gives you. Your sensitivity lets you detect authenticity. When someone is performing, you feel it. When someone is lying about how they actually feel, you sense the gap between what they say and what's true. Someone smiles. They say, I'm happy for you. But something lands wrong. A flicker, a gap, and you know, that's not what they feel. This makes you dangerous to people comfortable with their own inauthenticity and invaluable to people tired of pretending. Over time, you'll notice something. The people who trust you most aren't the ones you performed for. They're the ones who felt you seeing them. And the ones who resent you most? Often the ones who know that you know they're lying. Your sensitivity is a form of truth detection. In a world built on managed perception, that's a form of power. Most people get this next part completely wrong. They treat emotional sensitivity as a single trait, one dial turned too high. But what you're actually dealing with is a cluster. High sensitivity doesn't travel alone. It arrives with depth of processing. You don't just feel more, you think more carefully about what you feel. It arrives with a low sensory threshold. You notice subtle changes in environment and people that others walk past. And it arrives with a rich inner life. Ideas connect to feelings. Feelings connect to memories. Memories connect to meaning. Dr. Elaine Aron's research identified this cluster in roughly 15 to 20% of the population. Not a majority, not even close. Which means, if you've spent your life feeling like you don't quite fit, there's a statistical reason. You're operating on a different register. Not a broken one, a different one. The world wasn't built for your register. That doesn't mean your register is wrong. But this is where the real challenge begins. When you process information, you're not just receiving it, you're feeling it, thinking about it, placing it in the context of everything you've ever learned. This takes longer. It's also more accurate. You're less likely to be fooled by surface appearances. You're also more likely to be overwhelmed because you're integrating so much data. The challenge is learning which signals matter and which are noise. You walk into a party. You feel the energy of the room. The tension between two people in the corner, the forced laughter near the door, the sadness behind someone's smile. All of it hits you at once. Most highly sensitive people never develop the discernment to sort through this. They treat all incoming information as equally important. That's where sensitivity becomes a liability. But this is also where practice changes everything. Learning to distinguish signal from noise is the core work for someone with your wiring. It's not about feeling less. It's about feeling more selectively. Let's talk about where the real damage happens. You're 7, maybe 8. You cry at school. A teacher says, "You need to calm down." A classmate laughs. And something inside you learns, this isn't safe. From that moment, you got a message. Your emotional responses were too big, too visible. Crying brought embarrassment. Crying in private became a habit born of shame. Over time, you built a story around your tears, that they meant instability, that they made you unreliable, that they signaled something to fix. That story was handed to you by a culture that mistakes emotional suppression for emotional maturity. It was wrong. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology show that chronic emotional suppression correlates with elevated cortisol, increased inflammation, measurable deterioration in long-term health. Crying isn't a leak in the system. It's how the system clears. When you cry, your body releases leucine and enkephalin, and endorphin. It releases stress hormones. Tears triggered by emotion have a genuinely different chemical composition than tears from irritation. Your body is doing something precise. It's not losing control, it's regulating. The people who never cry aren't managing themselves better. They're delaying the cost. And the cost shows up slowly. It accumulates as tension, autoimmune dysfunction, anxiety, emotion with nowhere to go turning inward, depression, disconnection from your own emotional life. The people who pride themselves on never crying are often the ones running the highest chronic stress in their bodies, the ones most vulnerable to sudden, explosive episodes, because they built a dam instead of creating flow. When the dam breaks, and it breaks catastrophically. You've seen this. The person who never cries, one day, collapses. The person who always stays calm, one night, explodes. Everyone is shocked. But you're not shocked, because you felt it building the entire time. Now here's something worth sitting with. The Ash conformity experiments showed 75% of people will deny what they can plainly see, just to avoid social friction. Staying in contact with reality, with feeling, under social pressure, isn't common. It takes something. The people who cry easily often haven't learned to disconnect from their own experience just because the room is uncomfortable. That's not fragility. That's a refusal to perform numbness. And that refusal is a form of integrity most people sacrifice before they realize they've done it. Every time you cried and felt ashamed, you were feeling ashamed of being honest, of being present. Let that land. But I know where your mind is going. You're thinking, okay, but what about the times it genuinely gets in the way? You're in a meeting. Someone challenges you. Heat rises, your voice cracks, your eyes fill. Instead of being sharp, you fall apart. That's a real experience, and it deserves a real answer. What's happening isn't weakness. It's an overloaded system. Your nervous system is processing so much so fast that the release valve activates before you choose it. This isn't a character flaw, it's a calibration issue, and calibration can be worked with. The research on emotional regulation is clear. The goal is never suppression. It's window of tolerance, expanding the range within which you can feel fully without being flooded. People with high sensitivity don't need to cry less. They need to build a larger container for what they feel, so the feeling moves through them instead of overtaking them. That's a practice, not a personality transplant. You're not trying to become someone who feels less. You're becoming someone who can hold more. Most people will never do this work. They'll keep narrowing their emotional range, calling it maturity, and losing access to themselves, piece by piece. You're doing the opposite. You're staying in contact, and that changes who you become over 5 years, 10 years, 20. The people who stay in contact with their inner life become the people others trust at the deepest level. Not the most popular, not the most comfortable, but the ones people come to when it actually matters. One more thing, and it might be the most important. The people who cry easily often haven't outsourced their conscience. You see a stranger crying on the bus, everyone looks away. You feel it in your chest. That's not dysfunction. That's a moral nervous system functioning exactly as designed. Across history, the people who changed things, who refused to look away when looking away was easier, weren't the ones who learned to feel nothing. They were the ones who never stopped feeling everything. You've been told your whole life that your tears are the problem, that if you could just hold it together, everything would be easier. And you're right, it would be easier. But easier isn't the same as better. And the version of you that never cries isn't a stronger version, it's a smaller one. You're not too sensitive for this world. You're sensitive enough to finally see it clearly. So don't confuse control with numbness. They're not the same thing. One protects you, the other slowly takes from you. Once you understand the difference, once you stop trying to cry less and start understanding why you cry, something shifts. You stop apologizing for the part of you that notices. You stop performing detachment for people who mistake it for strength. You move differently. Not louder, just more grounded. But this leads to something harder. Because once you stop suppressing what you feel, once you understand your own psychology this clearly, there's a temptation. To explain yourself, to share what you know, to justify your reactions to the people around you. And that's where the next layer begins. Because Machiavelli understood something about explanation almost no one takes seriously. The moment you explain yourself, to anyone for any reason, you give them something they can use. Not against you, through you. If this clicked, let me know in the comments. That recognition you felt watching this, that's worth talking about. And if you want to go deeper, make sure you're subscribed. What comes next goes further than most people are willing to follow.